Okay, second premise is that traditional communities do not often voluntarily give up or sell the resources on which their communities are based until their communities have been destroyed. They also do not willingly allow their land bases to be damaged so that other resources, gold, oil, and so on, can be extracted. It follows that those who want the resources will do what they can to destroy traditional communities, as we see. Third premise. Our way of living, industrial civilization, is based on, requires, and will collapse very quickly without persistent and widespread violence. I gave a talk a few years ago in Eugene, and afterwards this guy raised his hand and he said, you know, you talk about how violent this culture is, and I just don't see it. There's no violence in my life. I'm not violent myself. I don't see any violence. And it's significant to this story, by the way, that it was a man who said it, not a woman. And I said, okay, where's your shirt made? And he looked and it was made in Bangladesh. And I said, do we even need to talk about that? He's like, no. I said, okay. And also, I'm just wondering, do you pay rent? He's like, yeah. I said, why? He said, because I don't own? I said, no, what would happen if you didn't pay rent? He said, well, I get evicted. I said, what does that mean? I don't understand. What happens when you get evicted? And he said, well, a sheriff would come to my house and he would, I said, stop right there. What happens if the sheriff comes to your house and you say, hey, I was just getting done cooking dinner. Come on in. Have some food. So the sheriff comes in, sits down, and you cook him dinner, and you feed him, and you don't poison him. And then after dinner, you say to him, you know, it's been nice having you here, but your company's not all that pleasant, so I would like for you to leave my home now. What would happen? He said, well, the sheriff would take out his gun, and he'd say, I'm here to evict you. You got to leave, because you didn't pay your rent. I said, so the reason you pay rent is because if you don't, some guy is going to come to your house with a gun, and he's going to kick you out of your home. He's like, I guess. I said, okay, let's try it again. What happens if you're really hungry, and so you go to the grocery store, lots of food there, you know, and you just start eating. What's going to happen? So we're going to call the sheriff, and he's going to come. He's the same guy. He's a real asshole, isn't he? The sheriff's going to come and take you away. So what this means is that in order for you to survive, in order for you to have a place to sleep, a place to be, you have to pay somebody. And in order to eat, you have to pay somebody. That's really weird. And if you don't, somebody with a gun is going to come and do something bad to you. So part of the reason that a lot of us don't see the violence is because, well, part of the reason is a different subject. Part of the reason is because a lot of the violence is exported. I was doing a talk in Massachusetts a few years ago, and somebody said to me afterwards, you know, we now are living way more sustainably than they did 100 years ago. And I said, how do you know that? He said, because there's a lot more trees here in Massachusetts than there were 100 years ago. I said, yeah, it's because you're getting all your wood from South America. And so a lot of the violence is simply exported. And then the other part of it is a lot of us don't perceive this violence because we've been so metabolized into the system and we so accept its premises that there's no need to do violence to us because we're standing straight in line. But of course, if we step out the tiniest bit, got to watch out. Oh, but we're not going to do that. Okay, now we go to the fourth premise. This culture, civilization, this I think might be my favorite premise of the book, is based on a clearly defined and widely accepted, yet often unarticulated hierarchy. Violence done by those higher on the hierarchy to those lower is nearly always transparent, invisible, it's unnoticed. When it is noticed, it's fully rationalized. Violence done by those lower on the hierarchy to those higher is unthinkable. And when it does happen, it's met with shock, horror, and the fetishization of the victims. And there's so many examples of this. One example is that within my own family when I was a kid, my father was extremely violent. And so the violence flowed constantly downhill. And the one time that my brother ever fought back, he got beaten far worse than any other time because, of course, he had committed blasphemy by sending violence up the hierarchy. That's one example. Another example is, oh, I live where there's tons of bears near where I live, and I just love seeing them. Oh, so cool. A mother and baby bear actually fell asleep outside my mom's house the other day. And so cool, I was thinking about that afterwards. How many wild animals have I ever seen asleep? And, well, 2 bears. Maybe some grasshoppers, it's hard to tell. Anyway, so I mean, but people, and I walk through the forest all the time. I walk through forest at night with no lantern and all this stuff. And the Fed's going, huh, he walks through the forest at night with no lantern. You can use that. Anyway, so I walk through the forest. I'm scared of the Feds, frankly, not the bears. Anyway, so I walk through the forest at night, and people go, oh my God, aren't you scared of the bears? I mean, they could attack or something. And I know that there is 1 person dies in North America every other year from bear attacks. And 46,000 Americans die every year because of automobile crashes. So we're scared of the wrong thing. I mean, we should walk through a parking lot and it's like, oh my God, you know? The cars are all going, Anyway, if you don't believe me about the violence is only allowed to flow one direction with that, the next time there's one of those, like the next time there's a big protest or something, maybe anti-war or anti-so-called free trade, you know, whatever, just do an experiment, which is take a baseball bat and then just walk up to one of the policemen and say, excuse me, Officer Friendly, nothing personal, I'm just conducting an experiment. And hit him, and then hit him a couple more times real fast. And then, somebody's going to take down your name. Okay, so anyway, and then I'll talk to you in about 50 years. Because you've committed blasphemy, you've sent violence up the hierarchy. Oh, and then I want to say one more thing about this, which is that and this is going to have to, does anybody mind if I swear? I think that the word fuck is the most amazing word in the English language because it's all of patriarchy condensed into 4 letters. Because the same word that means make love to means do great violence to. That's really, really twisted. And it's also kind of confusing. I mean, because so somebody can say to me, like, I'm going to fuck you. And I'm like, I need more information. I mean, even within the context of a loving heterosexual relationship, this shows how deeply the objectification of women, how deep the objectification of women goes within this culture and within our language, is even within the context of a loving heterosexual relationship, it's really hard to not have the woman get objectified. So the man says to the woman, I would like to be inside of you. You know what just happened? She's the object of the sentence. Okay, on the other hand, the woman says to the man, I would like for you to be inside me. You know what? She's still the object of the sentence. So the man says to the woman, I would like for you to be around me. And she's like, I'm sorry, can you speak English? I don't know what you want. Where it's like okay for homosexuals to be in the military as long as you don't talk about it. I guess you can do whatever you want, you just can't talk. Anyway, but, which by the way, I have to say, full disclosure here, I have to say that I actually agree that homosexuals should not be allowed in the military. I feel very strongly actually that homosexuals should not be allowed in the military. But that probably doesn't mean as much as it could because I also think that heterosexuals, asexuals, the transgendered, bisexuals should not be allowed in the military either. Fifth premise. The property of those higher on the hierarchy is more valuable than the lives of those below. It is acceptable for those above to increase the amount of property they control, in everyday language to make money, by destroying or taking the lives of those below. This is called production. If those below damage the property of those above may kill or otherwise destroy the lives of those below. This is called justice. Sixth premise is the one that I sort of alluded to early on. this culture is not redeemable. The culture won't undergo any sort of voluntary transformation to a sane and sustainable way of living. If we don't put a halt to it, civilization, this culture, will continue to immiserate the vast majority of humans and to degrade the planet until it, civilization, and probably the planet, collapses. The effects of this degradation will continue to harm humans and non-humans for a very long time. Seventh premise. The longer we wait for civilization to crash, or the longer we wait before we ourselves bring it down, the messier will be the crash, and the worse things will be for those humans and non-humans who live during it and for those who come after. If somebody would have brought down civilization, whatever that means, 200 years ago, if Tecumseh would have won, then people in the East would still be able to eat passenger pigeons. I mean, never minding passenger pigeons' beautiful existence for themselves. If somebody would have brought down civilization 100 years ago, people in this region, through the crash, would still be able to eat salmon. There's going to be people sitting along the banks of the Columbia 50 years from now, and, well, they'll be glowing, for one thing, because of Hanford, and they'll also be starving to death, and they'll be saying, I'm starving to death because you allowed the dams to stand. God damn you. And you know, but the dams are really important. You know, they're necessary for the electricity to make it so Safeco Field you can move the top back and forth. They're necessary to smelt aluminum for beer cans. Anyway, so the longer we wait, I mean, if somebody would have brought down civilization 100 years ago, we wouldn't have to worry much about global warming, and we wouldn't have to worry about the toxification of the total environment with pesticides. We wouldn't have to worry about dioxin in every mother's breast milk. I mean, if 50 and 75 years from now, are people going to be going, you know, if somebody would have brought it down 75 years ago, we'd still have amphibians. If somebody would have brought it down 75 years ago, we would still have, well, someone would have brought it down 15 years ago, they'll be saying 15 years from now, we'd still have sturgeon. You know, it's like, how long? You know, at what point? What's the threshold? You know, 100 years from now, it's like we'd still have, you know, name it. We'd still have oceans. Air to breathe. You know, that's not one of my premises, but that's something that if I would have thought of it when I was writing the book would have been one of the premises, which is the primary, if not only measure by which we'll be judged by those who come after is going to be the health of the land base. They're not going to give a shit as to whether we voted Democrat, Republican, Green, anarchist, didn't vote at all. They're not going to give a shit as to whether we recycled. They're not going to give a shit as to whether we were violent or nonviolent. They're not going to give a shit as to whether we're nice people or not nice people. They're not going to give a shit as to whether we wrote great books or made great films or did great talks or anything else. They're going to care about whether they can breathe the air and drink the water. You know, we can all fantasize whatever we want about some groovy eco-socialist utopia with free love everywhere. It doesn't fucking matter if you can't breathe the air and can't drink the water. And the only measure, I mean, it's embarrassing to say this, but the only measure by which any generation will be judged is the health of the land base that they pass on.